Okay, so this is a new universe picture I'm spelling at. It's also a new earth picture. It's also a new picture of human beings. And it puts the ground, it will open up eventually to a very different religious picture. And civilization, the old systems are disintegrating all around us. The old systems are mainly elaborations by the male mind. They're based, for the most part, they're fear-based. They come from fear, and they function by manipulating people with fear. And so we live in a lies of fear and deception, half-truths, outright lies, and people doing whatever they think looks good and whatever they think they can get away with. This climate weakens us. There is a direct connection between truth and health, between truth and strength. That is behind the drive of people like Jesus and the Buddha to get it right, and to impart teachings to people because because it makes a difference. If we know who we are, we will know how to live. If we know how the universe is set up, then we'll be able to make much better use of it than we at present are. If we have some idea of what the earth really is, which we have never really gotten right, we will do the right thing for her. And the most important new term, I would say, at every level of rebuilding our really destructive and soul-destroying system is connect. The meaning of reincarnation is we are all connected. It means every individual matters. We're all here with some role to play. We're all here now with some role to play. And everybody matters. And everything on the earth matters. Now, scientists have no idea when they study an ecosystem of where the real linchpins are, like who the most important animal is on which all the others depend. It might be some little cockroach somewhere, some little ant kind of thing. Nobody knows. Same thing in human life. We all have a place. The system at present is corrupt. It doesn't work. It does not honor the individual. It does not respect life, and it does not respect the earth. These attitudes are built into the ways we think. And they are disintegrating. Thank God. At the same time, the new ideas are coming in. And the clearer we can get about who we are and who the earth is, the better we can restructure civilization along the right lines. It needs to be restructured on truth and love and caring and kind-heartedness. All the great spiritual teachers teach this. This is what we're here for. We have spiritual reasons for being here, not just destroying the planet or filling our homes with thousands of things and TVs in every room. We're here to go out with the trees and find out what they have to teach. We're here to go among the grasses and learn what they have to teach. Our own identities are mythic. They go back right into the very mists of time, eons. All human notions of identity at this point are incredibly trivial. Probably the two most arrogant forms of human beings I can think of at this point in our history are psychologists and neuroscientists. And both of them are supremely arrogant in direct proportion as their theories are false. Be warned. Neuroscientists just love to say to people, well, everything that matters to you, like God, immortality, etc., this is just fantasy. We're just an animal who has fantasies. Well, in fact, the real fantasy of neuroscience is that the neurons are producing consciousness. The truth is that what matters is what matters to people, and we all know it. It matters to us who we are, where, who, and what spirit is, or God is, immortality. I mean, we are mystical beings, and we are metaphysical, and these are our questions. and they wouldn't be in us if they weren't the questions. So, the many recent theories of human beings and the nervous system and everything else, simply, they're so limited. They belong with our little Cartesian box. We are opening the flaps of this box, and I live at 7,000 feet in the great southwestern desert in the U.S., and when you open the Cartesian box, the universe is rather large, and you can go out under the stars of a night, and you can begin to wonder, who am I? How long have I been here? How well do I know this planet? Anyhow, it's a pretty exciting universe, and it's worth getting up for every day. And so I'm replacing the great mathematical vision of nature, which is really a description of the most superficial aspects of matter. I'm replacing this with a mystical vision. The mathematical vision is really only open to scientists. The mystical vision is open for everyone. When you want to understand the universe or yourself, still everything and go forth. Because we are surrounded with magic and mystery, not matter and mechanism. We are not surrounded by things. We are surrounded by living beings with whom we can commune and communicate. Now, this feeds right into, okay, what's in it for us? I have been saying the real laws, properties, and characteristics of the universe belong to consciousness, not matter. They belong to consciousness. Okay, the laws of life are also the laws of consciousness. The first one, intent. Now, intent has been made very popular by a book called The Secret that's being read all over the world. One of the laws of consciousness is that whatever you focus on, you will get, whether you want it or not. And so you have to clarify what it is you really want, and then give it to the universe in a clear, concise statement, and then let it go. The end of The Secret shows the practical application in making money, of course. What else would we want to use intent for? Well, you can use intent for, you can want a deeper understanding of the universe. You can want to be able to communicate with the animals. You can want a closer walk with spirit, face to face. You can do anything. I would say, the secret of the secret was fairly well kept. There are many wonderful ways to use intent, except for making money, other than making money, and the secret, when you need to work with intent, like a scientist in the laboratory. You need to work with intent and get the hang of it. The trick is to, one, clarify what you want, give it very clearly to the universe, which hears, sees, feels, and then let it go. Don't keep checking in to see if it's working out. It doesn't work that way. The more you can give it out with some energy and let it go, the more effective you can be. This is the shamans, the great shamans, know how to use intent. They are extremely proficient. The universe I have described to you, consciousness, this is a way we can modify the consciousness of the universe, and it can affect us. The poet Goethe, this is not a 20th century discovery. Every person who ever thought about their lives for themselves knows something about it. The poet Goethe said, clarify your purpose, and then it's as if the whole universe gets behind you to help you realize it. Well, yes, that's how it works, and that's a possibility, and it's the reality in the universe's consciousness. We can interact with the universe. Even Jesus taught, pray believing that you have what you ask for, and it will be yours. Jesus is teaching intent. Pretty exciting universe. Here's the first law of life. What you focus on, you get. Now the second one is very strange. The strangeness is that our experience seems to come from us from the outside, come to us from the outside. But the truth is, what seems to be coming to us from the outside is actually being created on the inside by the ideas and the beliefs that we hold. And so, here's a secret of freedom in time. If you don't like your experience, you need to take a look at the beliefs you have that are drawing these experiences to you. Take a look at the ideas that you're carrying, as, in fact, I'm doing and trying to present a new version of the universe, the earth, and ourselves, which one is true, and two will get us out of the mess that we are in because we have lived for so long with lies. And so, when you the information we have taken in is always coming up. And when it's coming up, it's really saying, do you want to be bound by this, or you want it out? And when ideas no longer serve you, drop them. That we live beyond ideas. Everything we do is a function of ideas, but we can change our ideas. We can change our programming. And if you don't like the beliefs that are coming up, just zap them out. And so there's a freedom in time, and it's hinting at the true nature of ideas, enormously powerful, and the way that ideas and physical reality interact. And so, take an idea like evil. The earth plane is a plane of opposites. Up and down, right and left, right and wrong, good and bad. People think that if you're going to have one of the opposites, then you have to have another. And so they think every good requires an evil. This is not so. And the human race needs to try, the one experiment has never tried, it needs to carry in its mind there is only good. And then, one day they'll give a war and no one will go. They'll give a war and no one will come. Again, we're creating through our ideas. A belief in evil creates it. A belief in something creates it. There are various status of creation. We could see it in ourselves. We create little things not meant to last, then we build things that are really solid, meant to last. Okay, so that's immediate practical implications of living in a universe of consciousness, that our consciousness can interact with the universe around us to further our own development, our life purposes, whatever. We're all here to learn, to grow, to change. Well, what are we here for? I would say to create on the earth plane something beautiful for all. We're here to nurture the planet and each other. We're here, in fact, to create on earth, which is a plane of fear and separation. We're here to create on earth the conditions that we know in the spirit world from whence we come. Love, connectedness, wisdom, joy. We're here to create that for everybody and everything. And everything matters. Every little animal in the ecosystem matters. We find ourselves these days in these enormous pyramids. The male mind has always tended to function in hierarchies. And at the top is some king or despot or CEO or pope. And down at the bottom are the people who don't matter. Well, pyramids are only as strong as their base. If rich bankers don't start honoring the people at the base, the rich bankers are going to ultimately disappear. Everybody needs everybody else. The base needs the top for one kind of causality, but the top has to honor the base. We're all connected. That is the key to these new ways of thinking. We're connected, and it has to do with the fact that the fundamental term for the universe is consciousness. Okay, let's take a break. How's that sound?
Awesome. Sorry,
I got to take a little sip and get something to eat, Rob.
Okay.
Now I want to return to a major theme that I've been emphasizing. Neuroscientists today are so bamboozled by mountains of facts about brain, they haven't the foggiest idea even what the issues are anymore. And they really need to go back to the drawing board and make a few distinctions. The only reason that most people can have these simple-minded assumptions, well, of course the neurons produce consciousness, everybody knows that, the neurons produce consciousness, is because they have never looked hard enough at consciousness to figure out exactly what has to be explained, or what the parameters would be on any kind of neural explanation. So neuroscience needs to go back to the drawing board. Okay, let me point out to you how hard this is how hard it's going to be to solve any of these problems within present principles. I started these talks with Roger Penrose, wonderful physicist, in 2004 wrote a book called The Road to Reality, description of the whole of physics with its laws, its theories. And at the end of the book he says, in fact, physics has missed it, has failed to find the road to reality. And indeed, Roger says, it does not even know what physical reality really is. Well, of course, if you don't know what physical reality really is, and you can't base theories on it, as most people are. So Roger, and then at the end of the book, Roger says, well, he said, consciousness is out there like everything else in physical reality. And so he gives his own kind of quasi-quantum mechanical theory of consciousness in terms of bubbles and blisters and space-time gravitational collapse of the wave function. And these are terms that are associated with the complexities, and I would say, the complexities of modern physics. So Roger gives his and he calls it orchestrated reduction. And at one point, he's quoted widely as saying, OR is consciousness. Consciousness is OR. Well, I dare say it isn't. And if consciousness is out there in physical reality, like everything else, but we don't know what physical reality really is, then physical reality can just as well be out there in consciousness, as I have been maintaining. And in fact, all these bubbles and blisters and space-time stuff are expressions of consciousness. The bubbles and blisters are already expressions of consciousness. Every model these days being proposed to explain consciousness is an expression of consciousness, because I have made consciousness such a fundamental term, because in fact it is the fundamental term, and both the Buddha and Jesus knew it, and we'll talk about that later. Jesus taught the God who is love, and this is another part and parcel of the consciousness universe. The religious authorities did not want to hear about a God of love. They are much more interested in a vengeful, judgmental God with whom to terrify the people, to keep everyone in line. Now, this is not, Jesus spoke about the truth that will make you free. He spoke about, I come to reveal things hidden from the foundation of the world, reincarnation being one of them. And at every turn, when you're reading the Gospels, you can feel the pressure and the press of religious authorities doctoring the text. This is not Jesus, this is Rome. And we are very much modern Rome. And whereas both the Buddha and the Jesus lived by begging, basically, they took whatever people would offer them. There are big bucks to be made these days on marketing salvation, as we well know. This is not Jesus. And it's time to really find out what Jesus was about. And it's pretty simple, actually. And we'll talk about that later on when I come to deal with religion. Okay, so back to the difficulties of neuroscience. John Searle is a philosopher who's always trying to tell scientists what to do. And somewhere he says, consciousness is a biological phenomenon like any other, and it will have a biological answer in terms of neural correlates in the brain. Well, the problem is consciousness isn't a biological phenomenon like any other. The brain cannot possibly be secreting consciousness, secreting ideas in the same way that the liver secretes bile. Ideas are very problematic things, Where do you find an idea among the neurons? The neurons, I've laid it out for you in my science discussion, how difficult the problem is. How can neurons in the brain that function by pushes and pulls of the forces produce an idea or a whole train of related ideas, related in terms of meaning, of content? My answer is very simple. They can't. And it's all the other way around. But so far, for the last 20 years, the Tucson Conference Towards the Science of Consciousness has been meeting with yet no science of consciousness whatsoever, just little glimpses and glimmers here and there. A great many of the bright boys of neuroscience digging in their heels to maintain their views at all costs. And so I want to, before I end this session, I want to return to Descartes. Just over 300 years ago, a young man traveling with the army found himself stranded in a foreign town, in a bare room lit by a candle with nothing to do but think. And in a couple of nights, Descartes laid the whole thought foundation for the modern world. He defined dualism. The quote, mind-body problem comes from Descartes in its present form. Descartes divided the universe into two kinds of things, mind and matter. Human beings and God had mind. Nature was just matter, and human beings were composites of matter and mind. And matter, Descartes described very clearly as the weighable, the measurable, the extended in space and time, utterly devoid of inner life. Now this Descartes' image of nature is behind the whole of modern science. It's not, matter isn't quite that simple anymore, but deeply embedded in our whole civilization is an attitude that we can do whatever we like to nature. It's not conscious. We don't have to have a conscience about it or anything like that. Descartes in the Meditations is a dualist. There are minds and there are bodies. And he spent a lot of time trying to figure out how they could interact. He chose the pineal gland because it was one of a single organ in the body where everything else in the brain was divided in halves. So that's why he went for the pineal gland, and he spent a lot of time trying to describe how two very different kinds of things, mind and matter, or mind and body, could interact in the pineal gland. Descartes was a dualist, but his age, the Cartesian thinking, as it was called, was high on his concept of matter, because it was a masterstroke for developing science. It meant that scientists didn't have to worry about inner properties of matter or ideas or anything. They could just weigh and measure. And that's what we've been doing for the last 300 years. Now, the great strength of science owes to the simplicity of Descartes' concept. So do its limitations. And limitations are just now coming to light, because Descartes' view of matter, or view of nature, is in fact false. And we're all beginning to wake up to the disaster we are causing for the planet in continuing to function with these old ideas. Descartes' followers went around kicking dogs just to hear them howl, reasoning that they didn't feel pain. These are just machines, you know, and this is the function of the wiring of the machinery. It was a masterstroke for developing science, but it was a disaster for the planet. At almost overnight, the planet lost her anima, her world, what Plato had called the world soul. The earth lost her soul and became things, commodities, resources, something essentially dead. This view of matter is at the base of our dead world, a world that stinks of death at practically every level of our lives. Starting off with the way we think about ourselves as numbers, statistics, casualties, collateral damage, whatever, and the way we raise our animals for food, and cruel and inhumane, inhuman and in animal surroundings. Well, the human race has an enormous reckoning ahead of it. When we wake up, and it's all about awakening, part of it is about to what we are doing here, and the other part of it is to what we need to be doing. And we need to be basing civilization on truth, not on these incessant little games of ego and power and control that are running the show. And there's a kind of petty, it's Cartesian thinking, matter mechanism mindset. There's a kind of petty rationality that dominates the whole of the modern world, our technological world. And our whole situation, our civilization is psychopathic in the sense we cannot feel the pain of our victims. We don't even think, because they can't feel. They don't have any pain. Everybody knows animals don't have pain, they just make noises. It's very, these views of Descartes are embedded in all of it. Descartes' age was high on physical realism. Descartes is really the father of physical realism. Now, that's an expression of this conviction that, well, matter is what's real, and whatever it is, it's what's fundamental, and everything else comes from matter, which I've been claiming isn't true. And in fact, at the end of his life, Descartes, who guided his whole life by dreams, had this dream. He dreamt that the universe is a huge machine, and in the middle, propelling the whole, was consciousness. He was very favored by the powers that be, with deep insights into the nature of reality. But you know, we are physical realists. Now, ever since there's something in us that does not like dualism, so as soon as Descartes set it up, people immediately began getting rid of it. It was developing science got rid of God right away, and these days it spends a lot of mental effort on getting rid of the mind. We are matter. We are material beings, and matter produces consciousness at the end of evolution in us and some of the higher animals. I've just been disputing this. Consciousness is everywhere and in everything, and in fact it's the prime mover in everything, not matter. Nobody has ever improved on Descartes, and nobody has ever gotten free of dualism. And whether they think they have or not, they haven't. Descartes could outthink virtually every modern thinker who thinks they have discovered the errors of Descartes or thinks they have overcome dualism. In fact, Arthur Lovejoy's book, The Revolt Against Dualism, which came out in the 50s, claims that, in fact, the revolt has failed. Nobody has overcome dualism. And so I am saying, at this point, people have tried to overcome dualism by making matter the basic principle. I am saying this will not work. It does not work. It has not worked. And the reason that we have no science of consciousness at this point is because this is a totally erroneous way to go. That this assumption that matter is the basis and produces consciousness is the wrong way to go. And I've said the only way to solve what's called the problem of dualism, or the mind-body problem, is to make consciousness the fundamental term, as I have been doing in these talks, and then you can overcome it or well, that is the fundamental principle. And so let me answer some of the questions that come. Let's be metaphysical. I want to go on, and I really want to talk about spirit and a new basis for religion, given the consciousness universe, the truth of it. This is a universe that both the Buddha and Jesus knew, although it's not clear any of the philosophers even suspected it. But I want to say something about physical realism again first. Philosophy, where are the thinkers in the modern crunch? Well, in fact, as a graduate student in philosophy, I was told very firmly, I had a love of metaphysics, I was told very firmly, metaphysics is dead. Science has all the answers. And a great deal of many of the thinkers and the whole of, I would say, modern philosophy is fairly moribund because they are apologists for physical realism. They are mainly devoted to shoring up the worldview of science and proclaiming the end of metaphysics, where, metaphysics has a way of burying its undertakers. And at that point, I had already realized that science ran into trouble at the limits, and I wasn't about to be put off by the prejudices of modern philosophers and, check out their funding sources, and you'll know why they celebrate these ideas all the time. Physical realism and scientific materialism have gone forever. They are defunct. The littlest bit of matter contains consciousness. There are no cleverly wired machines or automata in Descartes' sense, or Aristotle's and Plato's sense. There's no matter, mere matter, or brute matter, blind chance. There's no matter in that sense at all. The whole universe is animate. And little children know this. Stephen Hawking once said he could only really share his theories with children. And Hawking doesn't think this way, but little children do. So do the mystics. And if Immanuel Kant had read the mystics, who are all climes, who agree on just about everything, instead of the theologians of his day, which agreed on nothing, we'd probably be in a different world now. If Plato had had a little broader understanding of matter, we also might be now living in a different world. But, it's never too late to catch up with our mistakes, and we need to ground ourselves on the truth of things. Okay. Let me answer a few questions that might occur to you. I think the easiest way to bridge from contemporary science to this view that consciousness is the fundamental term is at the notion of charge. When modern scientists think of matter, or life scientists think of the basics of matter, they generally think in terms of the positive and negative charges. We're looking at the outer of an inner. What you're looking at in charge is whenever two forms of consciousness come together, there's going to be a charge. If you want to find out how it functions, just observe yourself when you're in the presence of another person. Two different forms of consciousness, there will be a charge. The matter has had eons to develop its ways of behaving. And I remind you of what A.N. Whitehead said, the laws of physics are a description of the habits of matter. These charges have kind of settled into their little routines a long time ago, but we're describing them from the outside. When I was down in this domain, we all knew when we were talking at the dinner table about, this charge does that and that, we all knew what was going on. I would say at this point, unconsciously, we all knew that this is consciousness. Charges are they're very lively. We all knew that this was consciousness, but we never talked about it that way. We would gesture with our hands like we're describing the behavior of little beings, which you were. And so the problem with most of scientists think they're talking about something that they aren't. And since many scientists are scientists by day and mystic by night, they never realize this, that there's a total discrepancy between what they think they're saying and what in fact they are saying. And it generally has to do with denying consciousness to nature. Okay, where... Oh, the real question, of course, of modern science is, well, how does consciousness produce matter? The two people are asking it the other way around. They're asking, how do the neurons produce consciousness? The real question is, how does consciousness produce matter? Well, the principle is so simple, it's laughable. The mystics who think about these things describe the universe. The basis of the universe is consciousness vibrations, or units of consciousness, and they form into crowds and groups and relationships. When they're really dense, they're manifested in physical reality. When they're very loosely federated, then they manifest as consciousness alone. And so when this it's very simple in principle. This ends these spirit-matter distinction, the mind-body distinction. The spirit-matter distinction is really a continuum. At one end of the continuum, where the vibrations are dense, we call it matter. At the other end of the continuum, where the vibrations are rarer, we call it spirit. But it's really a continuum. And so, that cuts the ground under those kind of distinctions. And it also ends the split between religion and science. Because it's just a question of degree. And so where does the physicalness of physical reality come from? Hard stuff. Well, actually, I think it emerges at the intersection of many forms of consciousness. It's kind of an interactive function. And consciousness is always going in and out of physical form. It's always going in and out of spiritual forms. Some forms, some patterns, it gets in are very long-lived, like hydrogen and oxygen that form water, very stable arrangement. Others are looser. You have to want to know how it works. Just take yourself as a consciousness unit and see how you interact. The laws of nature are fairly uniform, or they're descriptive, the uniformities. Well, now what about a Platonic heaven? Plato has the world of the forms in some special Platonic heaven, where they are then translated by a half-god into a physical world by, quote, persuading matter or some unruly stuff that's lying about to form a cosmos around these eternal patterns. And Penrose is very much what would you call him, a realist about ideas, Penrose. Penrose is a Platonist about numbers, that numbers are ideas in these there doesn't need to be a separate world. Ideas are part and parcel of consciousness. Love is part and parcel of consciousness. Activity is part and parcel of it. Experimentation, all of these things are part and parcel of a consciousness universe. And so ideas are they're in the fabric of things. They're not set up there and down here. And they come and go like the sliding circle of water. There's a very animate universe out there, which I think frightens a lot of, I don't want to say this, I'll say this later when I've laid more grounds for this. A lot of male minds get very upset even at the thought of panpsychism for reasons I really do not understand. And something, minds other than their own out there, it doesn't bother me. I'm happy with infinite kinds of minds of all descriptions. And this is where the mystery comes. And of course we're going to build on these little mysteries for the greatest mystery of all, what's going on behind religion and what's going on at the base of all religions. I want to just back up a minute. The unconditional love that the reincarnational cycle embodies and incorporates means we're meant to try things. We're so cared for. We're meant to reach out without fearing that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. We are meant to. It's part of our evolution. The human race now is coping with an enormous mistake that I am trying to address in my own way, and a lot of other little mistakes. We live in a user-friendly Earth and a universe. Before human beings got here, every animal had its needs met. Everything was interactive and functioning. It's only human beings, in our usual arrogant and ignorant way, have torn through this fabric with these silly and trivial notions, both of what the Earth was and who we are. And so that's what I want to say to you. Rock, is there anything else that I should make clear? I would wish everyone was in this room and could say to me, well, but what about this? What about that? Because I'm trying to give you a very new picture of matter. And we build enormous castles in the air in our concepts. But it's much simpler. And I'll just remind you of some of the reinterpretation I did of science in my talks on science. First of all, 90%, 97% of all the energy of the universe, they call it dark energy. We don't know what it's doing there. Well, I would say that's infinite spiritual universes showing up in the interstices of our own. We're just one little universe among many, and they all have different conditions and different life forms. And in our universe, space and time are rules of the game for being in the physical. We'll deal with that when we come there. Now, what else did I want to tell you? Something very important. Oh, that's the dark energy of space. Okay, quantum mechanics. Feynman once said, if you claim to understand the quantum realm, you're either lying or crazy. Well, what you're really looking at down at the foundations of matter, you're looking at consciousness going in and out of physical form. In fact, I would say at this point, you're looking at the interface where our little Cartesian box version of reality is interfacing with the greater consciousness universe. There are just lots of things. The forces, well, they're shades and silhouettes of the real. Forces are an expression of consciousness. The forces are an expression of consciousness. Newton would have been absolutely comfortable with that notion. He called them the animating principle of bodies. Something much more interactive is going on. As I said to my mother about my childhood, I said, you pushed me. She said, you pushed back. Something like that is happening. And we are not the victims of things that are beyond our control. We are accountable and we are responsible. And we're responsible for all. We have put ourselves in this position with the kind of destruction we have been perpetrating on the planet. And it's time to start thinking about not how much money can I make off this, or how can I get this before my neighbor does, but how do I honor this being? How do I enhance its life? Love. It isn't the love of destruction. It isn't the love of having power over other people. Love accepts, affirms, nurtures, cares for, supports. Women know what love is, Plato missed it because there were no women in the academy. The women know that the foundation of the universe is love. The men think it's a formula. And we're living in a world run by formulas. It is vital that we start thinking in new ways. The old stories have given out. Awakening. We are waking up. We are letting in the light. What it means to be a human being is more incredible than we could ever have imagined. It's time for these little tales of heavens and things to be over with. We play our lives on an enormous stage. And and we will go on, and we live forever. And human beings generally let their gods live forever, but in fact human beings live forever. And growing, changing, evolving in a universe where nothing is static or stable. And if quantum physicists could realize that at the foundation of the universe are not bits of matter or things, but in fact beings or selves, they'd have a lot less trouble understanding them. And I referred to you already, there was a heyday of thinking about the atom and the structure of the atom way back in the early 1900s with Einstein and Planck and all the boys. Marie Curie and Einstein often hiked together on weekends and talked science non-stop, as we have all done at some point. We are a scientific age. We are a technological age. We think the universe functions as we do. It's not true. It only functions in a very limited perspective. It functions because we're mostly ignorant of the real effects of our actions, i.e. we make cars and they pollute the planet, and in fact they destroy the planet. And it's time that we all got ourselves out of the fear impulse. And I'm urging all of you, those who are in the love impulse, keep moving into the love. What's happening in the modern world is the more people are moving into their love, the more it's provoking the fear reaction. So that it looks at this point like the whole thing is coming apart at the seams. Who knows what's going to happen? But that's what's really happening. Ultimately, it's about love, and media will not let you know this. They make their money by keeping fear in place. But if you want to drop your fear, just walk in the woods for a while. Keep your earth connection. Stay grounded on the earth. And I have many things to say about the earth when we come to talk about religion. Jesus taught the God of love. Most of the man-made religions are fear-based, and it doesn't matter what they say. When you take a good look at them, you're being controlled or you're being manipulated. I mean, it was pretty overt when the Inquisition was active, but that's an old story. Every woman writing these days or thinking these days can smell the fires of the Inquisition just over her shoulder. But, men have gone mad, and the modern world is in a desperate situation, and we women, we have to speak up, and as I am doing. And I don't like what I see in the way that human beings are treating the planet and each other, and so I'm doing what I suggested to you. I'm dredging up the ideas that are behind it and trying to put in better ones. And we all have a role to play in this. Every one of us now is going to shape the future by the decisions that we now make. I think it was in 1997, a pamphlet was published by something like half of the world's Nobel laureates, warning that the human race had 10 or at best 20 years to turn its destructive ways around, or it was curtains for us. Not a single media referred to it. And a friend of mine called up one of the radio stations, a big Canadian radio station, and said, why haven't you mentioned this on your programs? And their answer was, well, it's not newsworthy. And as David said, not newsworthy, the fact that in 20 years the human race will go extinct. That's the level of denial that we're all living at. And I'll talk about what we can be doing right around our areas. I would just tell you at this point, I don't want to, we need new ideas. The earth needs green cover at this point, at every level. If you can't do anything anything really more complicated, sow grasses, plant trees. Deserts are increasing everywhere. The seawater levels are changing. The oceans, the Arctic, they're at the tipping point. Coral reefs are collapsing, disintegrating. The forests are disappearing. Recent photographs from space, time-lapse photography, have shown how fast the forests are being destroyed. And there's a kind of disconnect these days between the mind and what people are doing. The men cutting the rainforest know that it's going to destroy the planet for their children. They're doing it anyhow. The guys shooting in Iraq, they didn't know who they were shooting at or why. They just shot. There's a total... The old answers are over. They're hanging on in these really destructive systems, but they're becoming so ridiculous, and the kind of games that go down everywhere, this posturing and this macho kind of stuff about the, running out in the universe and running out in the forest and killing animals, it's just out of place. It's, the feminine impulse is coming in. It's coming in with everyone. It's coming with some very strident young women these days, because Artemis and Athena are making their return. The dark goddesses are making their return. And they are dark because of their long victimization at the hands of the patriarchies. They are all returning. They are extremely dark. They're in every soul. You have to be incredibly charitable with yourself, because the universe is doing a new thing. And all of us are trying to keep up. Many, many people these days, and you can tell them almost right away, are clinging to the old ways of fear out of fear. We're not just an isolated case in the universe. These things we're finding in ourselves, these are cosmic principles that are in us. And love and ideas are there right in the fabric of the universe, in its very foundations. In a way they cannot be there in a universe of mechanics. Well, that's what I wanted to say to you. And, I need to add one thing. I've said about overcoming Cartesian dualism. What is the true solution to Cartesian dualism? The neurons are not producing consciousness. What are they up to? Well, I say they're carrying consciousness. And neural networks accommodate the field properties of consciousness. And how does it all work? It works kind of by a kind of alignment from the top down mostly, but interactive at the base. Here's a simple picture. My consciousness aligns the consciousness of neurons that in turn aligns the consciousness of atoms and molecules within it. It's like having a shared vision, or having we know it again in human life. Our causalities are often shared visions, or a shared purpose, a purpose of spirit. That's what's happening. David Chalmers has said, well, he thinks it's a two-way street between mind and brain, brain and mind. It's a one-way street in this sense that whatever it is, the mind, the mind is organizing the brain's consciousness, which is organizing the consciousness of molecules and atoms. It's consciousness interacting with consciousness all the way down. My deep consciousness, or the aspect of myself that I would call my consciousness, is interacting with the cells, the consciousness of cells all through my body. The causalities are among different forms of consciousness. They aren't between mind and matter. They are between forms of consciousness. So I think that's about what I want to say. That tidies up the old paradigms. And I think I'll go on and talk about gender next time, because there's something rather obvious in the modern world about male ways of doing things, which are kind of up for everybody to have a look at these days, because they're really kind of run their course. And in many quarters, given the kind of games, political games that go down over the whole planet, they're so ridiculous that it's hard to believe anybody ever took them seriously. And certainly we can't take them so seriously for very longer. Ken Wilber said somewhere, how do you know that it's time to live, how do you know it's time to leave a certain religious stage? His answer is, when it's just too silly to stay on. A lot of what's going down in the Congress now are old ways of behaving that, given the magnitude of what we are facing, they're just too silly to even engage our interest. There's a revolution going on from the base, and that's where it has to come from. And most of the attitudes to this incoming energy, which is very chaotic in many ways, are to sit on the energy, or contain it, or to apply more matter mechanism mindset to the earth. The earth shall do as we say. This has always been our attitude to the earth. Well, you know what? She won't. And we are going to have to change our tune if we really want to stay here. So I think that's it for today. And I want to go to the deep foundations of religion. Because this whole time in our history is really, as has never been any other time, about leaving fear behind for love. And religion has always functioned through fear. And if we can, this is not Jesus. This is man-made religion. Men making up God largely in the image of men. Freud was quite right when he said God is the father figure projected on eternity. That's true of the man-made religions. But that is not religion. And this is not Jesus. And so we'll talk about it in coming times. Lots of love.